Cherished ones of the divine ideal, I am come this morning in the fullness of Christ's perfectionment to bestow upon you greater awareness of your needs, your spiritual needs, that you might enter into the fullness of the might and the power which is of the Spirit of your own mighty I am presence, and might become delivered from all forms of terrestrial bondage which is not the fiat of God. I would like to call to your attention this morning that the fiats which mankind utter by deed sometimes are more powerful in governing their worlds than those fiats which they utter in words. Therefore would it not be the part of great wisdom if you, beloved ones, would recognize the need to harness the energies of your words, benignly uttered in invocation for the great mercy of God, to your deeds, so that the words and deeds which you bring forth exemplify the Spirit of Christ's perfectionment and those qualities which you would enjoy if you had received the fullness of the radiance of the Holy Spirit. Now frequently I am in contact with men and women who were once a part of life as you are, but have either made their ascension or have left behind for a time the mortal form. Some of these are aware of my identity, of course, and I refer to those ascended ones, but frequently unascended of mankind are not. And therefore all do not recognize my position in the hierarchy or the fact that I am the Manu of the seventh root race. Yet I call to your attention today that these are all able to behold my light. For when men are stripped of the mortal coil of their being and enter into the world of formless state, they find that many of the conditions of the outer world which betrayed them by reason of the rigidity of the senses is no longer a hindrance to them, and they are able to see with greater ease many spiritual qualities. However, I would like to call to your attention that mankind very frequently, when in contact with exalted beings, are not aware of the fact as to whom they are in contact with. For example, many people, in passing from the screen of life, have been contacted by your beloved Kuthumi, and have supposed that they were in the presence of the ascended Master Jesus. Now this, beloved ones, proves to you that mankind, because they do not have a discriminating intelligence in action, fail to apprehend the vibratory action of ascended beings and are unable to identify one from the other. This is a misfortune and a lack of expansion into the realm of pure seeing. However, it is remedial, and mankind may, through the expansion of the Christ intelligence within them, through familiarity and through greater contact with their God source, find the fullness of the expansion of their divine faculties unfolding, so that they will enter into those faculties and their use in a manner which will bring them closer to the celestial beauties of heaven. Now, precious ones of the light, may I point out to you that those who are blind physically and have never from birth onward beheld the light of the sun, have never beheld the beauty of a lily, have never gazed into a child's face, and for that matter have never seen their own face, but have had to utilize the facility of the sense of touch to be able to distinguish objects and form, are certainly very limited, and were they quite suddenly to be given the gift of sight, would find some time was necessary for the acquirement of the proper use of the senses which would then be opened for them. This is true also spiritually, and therefore there is a so-called gestation period from the time of the onset of man's ability in a spiritual sense, during which he must develop those specific qualities that are bestowed upon him. During this period, it is unfortunate that some do not recognize the bestowal of the gift of sight, and they do not recognize that spiritual graces have been conferred upon them, and therefore they tend to sink back into a state where the use of these faculties does not permit its expansion, so much so that it is almost as though they were blind, spiritually speaking, and had never had their spiritual sight opened. Patience, beloved ones, is a necessary requisite for the expansion of the faculties of the soul. And today, as I am directing to your attention, the great expanding light of God that is ever before you, to acquaint you with the glories of the ascended Master Octave and the blessings you may expect in the future, I would call to your attention that the right use of opportunity must, of necessity, be brought in to manifestation by each individual acting in their own world to appropriate those gifts and graces which they have received from the hand of God. Now, as I am speaking to you and drawing near unto you, to draw you closer into the fullness of your own great God-self, I would point out to you the majesty and mastery which has been manifested in all of the ascended masters and their great dedication to life. I shall start now for a moment with beloved Jesus, who is most familiar to you, and point out that mankind to the present hour has little understanding of the dimensions of Jesus' consciousness. They do not realize the great spiritual sight which this Master of Love has. They do not have any concept whatever of that which is beyond the range of their own externalized ideas. I point out to you then that their oneness with the great God presence revealed by Jesus is limited by their lack of perception and knowing and spiritual seeing. It is therefore so essential that they come to understand some of the great concepts that were revealed by God, His mighty I Am presence, unto beloved Jesus. These concepts and revelations which were bestowed upon him by the Holy Spirit were the vital infusion of the divine majesty which entered into his being and enabled him to rise above the mass consciousness and into the divine ideas of the Godhead. This majesty, this bestowal of the Father upon the Son, is also the prerogative of those who follow in his footsteps. And therefore I admonish this day that all recognize there is a need to expand into the consciousness of the Master behind the form of his luminous presence and the majesty which is apparent in the feeling of his radiation. When you receive the radiation of the beloved ascended Master Jesus, or any other master for that matter, blessed ones, this radiation comes to you in order to raise you out of the lethargy and sleep of the senses into the vibrant vitality of the Master. And when you, in your own sleep of the senses, do not accept this radiation and its fullness and the power of that radiation to cut you free, you yourselves are the losers of the divine vitality which is given forth as tangible light rays from the Master's own luminous presence. Therefore, beloved ones, were the Master himself to step through the veil and tangibly manifest his luminous presence, you as individuals, if you could not cognize the radiation of the Master and appropriate it in the service of your own divine flame, would be unable to see him and his presence in the room at the specific time that others were able to do so. And the fault would not lie in the fact that mankind themselves were unwilling to see him, but because they had not yet externalized the gifts which God had already bestowed upon them. That is to say, they had not externalized the use of those gifts and the perfectionment of the use of those gifts which the great law permits man to do. This, then, is a passing by, or a burying in the talent of man's being. Mankind takes this talent and wraps it in a napkin and holds it within their being, recognizing that it is powerful, recognizing that it is a radiance, but does not appropriate its use in behalf of the light. This is because of a lack of understanding on the part of the recipient, and not the fault of the one giving the gracious gift. Therefore today, during this Christmas season, when your hearts are turned to the fullness of the divine idea according to your own degree of understanding, I am coming forth, stepping forth, and bringing to your attention the importance of the use of your own consciousness as a lens to focus the divine idea. I am also bringing to your attention that the sense of spiritual unfoldment must occupy a certain percentage of your time and cannot be dismissed at a specific moment and cast aside with disdain, as man would do with an ordinary human garment which had served to protect them and shelter them from the cold for a brief span. Your own divine identity is the vestments of eternity and ought never to be put off. Mankind may put off outer garments of imperfection. They may put off discordant feelings. They may put off unrighteousness. But it is never necessary at any moment for mankind to lay aside spiritual perfection, or to feel that in some manner it is necessary for them to do so in order to enter the outer world or the specific momentum of service which they fulfill in the world of form. I call to your attention then, blessed ones, that wherever you go, you ought to be clad in the garments of the immortal presence of life, that your hearts and lips ought to breathe a constant prayer to God for the fullness of your divine mission. This is the manner and custom of the saints. It is the manner and custom of ascended beings. It is the means whereby man can climb out of all that is human into the glories of his own ascension, the rising and ascending of his consciousness transpiring not necessarily in a fixed moment of time, but occurring throughout the span of his existence from a given point thereof. I am hopeful that today you will elect to do so, and will recognize that regardless of all past unfulfilled resolves, that there is the divine possibility of unified hope existing before you as a pathway of safety. You need not fear to step upon this path. You need not to fear to set your feet upon this path, for that which is before you is the fullness of the light of the ascended masters, and it represents the path which they have trod before you. They are way showers, showing forth to you the way to your own divine release from the fetters of self-imposed bondage and the fullness of your Christ victory, unless you shall enter into and abide in the fullness of that victory consciously while you are yet unascended. I ask you, how could you, when you would be bereft of the body and its consciousness, bereft also of some of the present faculties which you enjoy, be able to do so in a more direct manner? I tell you, nay, for the way to enter into the kingdom of God is to enter into it in the chrysalis of the presence. You must recognize that the present moment is a chaliced moment out of which you must step into your eternal garments. These garments and vestments are standing before you, and they are held in the hands of the angel of your presence, your own great God self. But you must make the conscious call to your God presence that you may be clothed upon by immortality, and that immortality may become more real to you than the transient illusions which pass before you as a chimera of fact and fancy. Ladies and gentlemen, you are standing at the threshold of a new age, an age fraught with wonder and glory, but of necessity with those pioneer challenges which have always been the testing ground of the true spiritual aspirant. I would like to call to your attention that you must rise then out of all turmoil and confusion into the safety of the divine presence, and must hold fast to that presence as you would cling to life itself. Blessed ones, very few of you have experienced in any past time the particular distress of drowning. But I would like to call to your attention that were you cast adrift in a high sea with just a plank to cling to, that you would cling to that plank with great tenacity, because you would recognize that it was your passport, at least temporarily, to life itself. I hope then that you will recognize that the ascended masters and your divine presence and your specific understanding of their momentum is more than a plank to which you may cling to receive greater compassion and understanding of life's blessed purposes. Your presence is your passport to life. But, blessed ones, it is your attunement, your recognition, your personal contact with your presence that represents the specific glory which you shall receive from it. I would like to point out to you, beloved ones, that if the elixir of life, the universal elixir of life, were everywhere, and the chaliced goblet of your being were to contain but a drop, that portion would be all that you had, and therefore you would have to bask in it, to drink it, and to utilize it. Were you to spill it, or to cast it out of the goblet of life with disdain, this would be your loss and a great waste of opportunity. I call to your attention that most of you have much more than one drop. Most of you have today, according to your own blessed capacity, a goblet running over with spiritual ideas conferred upon you by our previous words and by those recordings made of our words, made and composed also of ascended Master's substance released into your world even while you sleep and throughout the day. You are all very rich in a sense in spiritual lore. You have bestowed upon you countless treasures which you have not yet fully appreciated or recognized. I call this to your attention that during this holy Christmas season you may also hold in your heart some greater sense of gratitude for all the gifts which life has bestowed upon you. For as you develop a sense of gratitude, it will enhance the value of those gifts, and you will dwell more in those spiritual gifts and graces, and less in the disappointing consciousness of the human. Ladies and gentlemen, you are about to take a step, a major step forward, which is not known to you at the present time, and I refer to the planetary evolution. However, as in this past year, so in that which is to come, there shall be a great dividing throughout the world of the sheep from the wolves, and it shall come to pass that mankind shall be separated in one sense from discord through the process of elimination by the great threshing floor of God, whereby the fan that is in his hand shall purge the floor and cleanse it. This refers now, beloved ones, in the prophetic sense to a personal purging of our chelas, of those elements of discord which they have regretted for a long time, but have somehow or other neglected to divest themselves of. It is a great misfortune that mankind will cling to those elements of life which bring them the greatest disappointments. Somehow or other they never seem to be able to recognize, when apart from our presence, the need for their own purging and purification from those elements which are no more their real selves than human filth and degradation which is cast aside in the sewers of life. I call to your attention then, beloved ones, that you must recognize the great purity of your being, and must recognize that this is your treasure, which abides in the heaven of Christ consciousness, that when you hold this great perfection of life in your consciousness and evaluate it properly, it becomes for you a touchstone, a sparkling gem of spiritual wisdom, a focus of ascended master light substance, a purifying coal from the altar of heaven, and the virtue of God imbued with his many qualities. These words which I speak to you in themselves are cups of light, but except ye drink the substance of this cup, how can ye have the life of these words within you? And therefore I ask you to recognize and to enter into the fullness of the cup of the ascended Master's consciousness, which overcomes the world and those elements of world distress which do not produce the pure expression of the Divine One. I know that countless times the students of this activity have within their own hearts expressed a longing and a yearning to be a greater expression of Christ's fulfillment. I know and I have witnessed the resolves and the high ideals which they have entertained at various times, periodically. But it has not been enough to cut them free. The resolves have not been strong enough. Their calls have not been intense enough, and with a great enough measure of fiery application to ensure them that they would at all times be the victors. Nevertheless, this is prologue. This abides in the past. The future is before you, and it is in the eternal now of your divine presence. Resolve then highly today that the message of the Christ consciousness embodied in Jesus and others of the ascended host shall be a message of joy to you, the joy to the world that shall leap in the sacred fire of your being and animate your consciousness on behalf of the great light. Now, I would like to call to your attention beloved El Morya and his great transcendent service on behalf of world government and the governing of all people upon this planet. Precious ones of the light, I am personally cognizant of the fact that El Morya has pledged tremendous elements of his being on behalf of various individuals for their individual salvation and in order to secure dispensations to expand the mighty power of the I Am flame all over the planetary body and for the freedom of mankind. Countless times individuals have toyed, have played with the precious offerings of this divine master. They have been imbued with a consciousness of such triteness that whereas I had in mind naming some of this triteness when I first begun to speak, I have decided that it bears no further notice than that I comment upon it in this manner. Ladies and gentlemen, those specific qualities of heaven which bear recognition by all and deserve the attention of mankind are the externalization of El Morya, and he has given of himself richly and has also suffered penalty because of the fact that he has given such tremendous offerings to mankind. Now consider for a moment the meaning of this. This master, knowing full well the record of various individuals, both in this activity and organization and in others, and knowing a record in some cases of recalcitrance and failure, which was most disappointing to the sponsors of that live stream, has still pled before the karmic board and asked that some specific karmic matter be set aside, offering to bear it upon his own shoulders, which were already overburdened, I might add, so that that live stream could go free and receive another chance, another opportunity, another day, another year, or perhaps a decade of time in which to fulfill their own divine mission. This master has actually offered himself and has stood between and interceded for mankind in order to create further opportunities for spiritual activities. Mankind have not recognized his love nor the transcendence of it. They have actually been concerned over such minor details of their own life and the lives of others as to bear no significant notice from our octave. They have been concerned with a trifle, whereas the major problems of their own life stream have been neglected and the true spirit of Christ consciousness has been overlooked. I call then to your attention that in the time that is to come, a great intense release of wisdom's flame shall come forth through this channel, and tremendous knowledge of a spiritual nature shall be beamed forth to the planet through the keepers of the flame instruction and through other information which we shall release. But I also call to your attention that the appreciation for this offering must be magnified in the hearts of those who receive it, that they themselves may be able to grow by reason of receiving the manna which descends to them for the nourishment of their souls. Ladies and gentlemen, the time has come and is past and overdue when mankind shall be concerned about the foolishness of mortal consciousness. I tell you, beloved ones, we are indeed cognizant of the need for divine order. We are indeed cognizant of the need for freedom. But we do have a most marvelous sense of timing and direction, which mankind would do well to emulate. We understand specifically when the souls of men are sick and need attention. We understand when it is necessary to release a specific healing momentum. We understand when there is a need to cauterize. We understand when there is a need to slash and cut with the sword of Christ's discrimination. And therefore today, in the midst of this Christmas season, when the hearts of men are joyous, I am bringing forth to you the need to cut yourselves free from all that is not of the Christ consciousness, that you may be able to have the joy of the Lord and enter into it and abide in it, not only through this Christmas season, but always, every day of your lives. Blessed ones, happiness is a quality of God. And if you enter fully into the divine consciousness of your own mighty I Am presence, you cannot fail to be happy. When any form of distress whatsoever, whether it be self-pity or neglect or a sense that God is neglecting you, enters into your consciousness, I tell you it means that you have cut yourselves off temporarily in consciousness from the heart of your own divine presence, and you are only temporarily ill by reason of the fact that you are not connected consciously with the mighty tide of life which your presence is pouring out to you. The remedy is very simple. It means to forget the foolishness of the mortal consciousness and mind and enter into the fullness of the immortal consciousness of your being, and then as you drink into that spirit of life, you cannot help but be happy, for God himself is happy, and every ascended master is happy, and it is this happiness that we would share with you in bringing in the great golden age. Now I cannot this day bring to your attention in the manner I would prefer to do all of that which is in my heart. It remains of necessity that I shall hold back a great portion of the dictation which I chose to give today, and see that it is directed into your consciousness throughout this day and eve, that you may have the translation of the Holy Spirit bringing to you throughout this day and evening and throughout the night a message of great importance to you. This message will come to you according to your own diligence in attunement with your God presence. The listening ear of your consciousness will be tested then this day to see whether or not you shall receive and accept that which God is telling to you, a message of cosmic unity, the bonds of Christ freedom, the purity of your life stream, and offering and consecration to the ascended masters. Beloved ones, mankind today, without being aware of it, are frequently very selfish in their giving. Their Christmas giving is also a reflection of some measure of human selfishness, for they are often afflicted with the idea that they must give in order to receive, and this is true, but they do not imbibe the true spirit of that giving. They do not understand that while it is true that it is more blessed to give than to receive, and while it is also true that they must give in order to receive, that which they must give is their all, and the fullness of their all to God in the service of their brothers. Beloved ones, ye cannot harm the ascended masters today. Ye cannot harm God if ye would, nor can any man. But through harming mankind made in the image of God, for whom God has helped, indirectly ye direct harm to the deity. I hope that you understand the meaning of this. It is when ye render a disservice to any part of life that ye render it to God. It is to man, yet unascended, that the disservice is done to, and it is this which separates you into the great mills of karmic responsibility, where accountability for your own acts returns to you. Ladies and gentlemen, my message is far more important than you may realize. I have not phrased it to you in the manner completely that I would, for there are certain elements of human problems in connection with delivering these messages to you. I call to your attention that at various times individuals enter into this sanctuary with a certain amount of a momentum of human discord within their being. Sometimes, through attunement with the divine presence, they are able to minimize and to eliminate all of this completely. Then again, unfortunately, they cling to a certain portion of that discord, and this becomes a force to in some manner interfere with the transmission of our words. And yet, we have conveyed this day the basic ideas which we desired to do, although not in that complete manner which we desired to do when we came. I would like to call to your attention that when everyone shall recognize their need to perform the ritual of catharsis upon their consciousness before they enter this holy service, not absenting themselves from this blessed meeting as some have done because they were inharmonious, but rather entering into this meeting with humility and with faith, calling for a cleansing of their consciousness prior to coming, and determining that God will keep the flame of their heart crystal clear in purity throughout the meeting, then I think that tremendous strides will be made by all, and I will release, and others shall release, to these blessed ones present here and others who shall come, such a tide of generative energy, regenerative energy, and spiritual blessings that your own beings will scarcely contain the blessings of the cup as it runs over with joy. Now, some of you may wonder why I use the word generative, regenerative, and so forth in this connection. Well, blessed ones, I would like to call to your attention that that which manifests in the form of generation is that outer physical self, and that which is regenerative is that spiritual self of man. It is necessary, therefore, that you be sustained, not only spiritually, but physically. Some of you require specific healing of your physical being, and it is necessary, therefore, that you have the generative faculties of your being, the physical side of life, also charged with the spiritual side of life. And so, therefore, we both generate and regenerate spiritual power in your midst in order to bestow the blessings of life upon man, the physical man, the mental man, the spiritual man, that in the triune essence all may become godly, godlike, the manifest presence of the luminous presence of God, which I am today manifesting. May the blessings of Christ consciousness abide in you always, and may you be kept throughout this season in the holy will of the Eternal Father, strong to save, strong to cherish the children of his infinite care. Lo, I am with you in the consciousness of the Christ, always, even unto the end of your personal age, and unto the end of all cycles, unto the entering in, and to the beginning of that cycle that is without end. I thank you and bid you good afternoon. blessed and beloved ones, may the unfolding Christ intelligence pour forth through the atmosphere and engender within your hearts the gentle fires of ministration and cosmic instruction. You have perhaps noticed that the sun, rising in its splendor, sometimes plays optical tricks and forms of embellishment upon nature itself, whereby by the reflected light beautiful patterns unfold. For example, your telephone wires at times are illumined by the rising sun until they resemble strands of diamonds sparkling. I would like to call to your attention today that as I am speaking to you, there is indeed in existence a sparkling diamond stranded wire of contact between your octave and our own. I would like to call to your attention that there pulsate and flows over this precious cable our radiation and instruction in order to exalt the God flame that is within you. As I am speaking to you this morning, there comes to thought some of the ancient celebrations which took place among the brothers during my embodiment as St. Francis of Assisi. I recall the Yule season with tender memories, and I recall how that my own heart was ever made more aware of the Christ through the focusing of my attention upon his nativity. But I would like to remind each and every one of you today that through contemplation upon the wonders of his birth, we were all able to find a parallel pattern concerning our own. We were able to understand through the miracle of his birth, the miracle of spiritual rebirth within our hearts. As we piled logs upon the Yule fire and heard the flames cheerily crackling, it reminded us of the great God flame. There is a similarity between light and fire which I would call your attention to. This similarity, blessed ones, points out to each one of you that the distant stars in the heavens are flaming masses of cosmic energy. As by comparison you think of the God flame within you, which beats your heart and sustains your life, does it not occur to you, gentle ones, that the same great cosmic fire which stirs the hearts of regenerating sons is within you in miniature pulsations of God's holy light? Bear well in mind, then, that the natal day of beloved Jesus is directly related through the natal day of each one from among mankind. All then ought to be stirred by the cheery crackling of the Yule log, the manifestation of God's sacred fires, being called to mind by outer manifestations of nature. The inner manifestations of the nature of God within your own soul should intensify your devotion until it too rises higher and higher in the divine sense, culminating in a flow of greater love, wisdom, and power into your world. I have not come for purposes of human vanity this morning. I have come this morning in order to bring you instruction of great benefit to your life stream. I would like to call to your precious attention this day the factors of memory which relate so to your identity. You can speak one and all and say, I am. You can recite your name. You can recite facts. Some of you can recite more facts than others, but all are endowed with the blessed faculty of memory. Some among mankind have expressed regret concerning the manifestation of the psychic forces upon the planetary body. I would like then this day to give some instruction to mankind that may have some bearing on their ascension and their future release from all psychic forces and destructive activities of the human mind and being. First of all, precious ones, energy flows through the consciousness in order to receive qualification. Mankind place their stamp of qualification upon energy and create thereby thought forms. These thought forms flow forth, and they find a place in the world of the Chila. In truth, I could say that each day a moving van would pull up before your front door, and that men would alight from this van and carry furniture into the home of your being. This furniture consists of the thought forms which you yourself have created. These are distributed in your world. They are stored in memory's storehouse. They have tangibility. They are constructed exactly as you have made them. They are yours and not another's. Although true that they exist in a magnetic sense, just as human voices can be recorded upon your magnetic recording tape, they nonetheless have a tangibility and can be called forth in full volume at the specific moment when you wish to recall them. Unfortunately, some men are not able to do this with facility, and some find unwanted thoughts tumbling out when they do not wish to have them. The creations of man, his thought children, are vital in one sense to him because they represent the investment of his energy. When they are misshapen and misqualified, they become a part of the psychic world. Men sometimes recall with nostalgia certain images and pictures from their past, and do not realize that in some cases this very nostalgic feeling carries them back into the psychic world of their own past creation. and brings forth van load after van load of forgotten memories. It is true that some of these are well wrought and faithfully constructed and possess virtue, symmetry of form, and loveliness. But amongst them are those which mankind would consign to the attics and basements of their homes, articles that are not useful, and yet for one reason or another they seem unwilling to part with. I am calling your attention this day to the fact that the sacred fire is in existence, and that the sacred fire is ready to receive those disqualified, misqualified conceptions of man which he had better shed rather than remember. O beloved ones, there is a statement of universal virtue in existence which stirs the heart of the beloved goddess of mercy. It is this: and their sins and their iniquities I will remember no more. Beloved ones, the quality of God's mercy is to cause the iniquities and wrongs of men to be cast, as it were, into the sea of forgetfulness, never to be any more. This can be said of imperfect creation. This could never be said of perfect creation. All that is perfect is divine. And if the fire try a divine work, seeing that the fire which is divine is composed of the same substance of divinity, it cannot consume itself, but like the 3 Hebrew children in the fiery furnace, must remain with the master identity of the perfect plan and pass through the flames unharmed, without even the smell of smoke. And yet all that is dross, all that is useless, all that is bric-a-brac, clutter, and human creation ought to be consumed from the moors and fenlands of life, until, wiped from the screen of life, the purity of the rising sun would reveal to all those transcendent chateaus of liberty, caverns of purity, expressions of holiness, and the expansion of the God flame in the world of all. This morning, as I have come to you, it is with the thought of enhancing the intellectual, spiritual knowledge of men, in addition to bringing the benefit of my radiation and love. The hallowed season of Christmas is always one to which mankind look forward to and leave with regret. And yet, I tell you, men might have this blessed season with them always, and never let it from them part, if they would but recognize that in this manger of human creation, the infinite babe represents that of divine worth which must grow and expand in their world. As we paid our homage to the Christ, the gold, the frankincense, and the myrrh, it was our sense of worth which made us forsake the kingdoms of this world and journey to that land where we found the young child laying. It was our understanding of value which caused us to go thence and to find there the living Christ in manifestation, And it will be your sense of values, beloved ones, the quickening, awakening power of immortality within you, which will teach you the meaning of qualification and the need to cast aside those outworn garments of human thought and creation, of human feeling, which have not produced God happiness for any part of life. In basic Christ simplicity, the mighty tide of life rises. In divine intelligence, the power of the light expands, and with its glow, it lights a new fire in the hearts of men. And as it passes from them in mighty waves, it both creates and destroys. It creates a new, fresh vista of love and loveliness. It destroys that which has blighted man's heart and consciousness and understanding. The creations of mortality that represent hate and viciousness and destruction must fall before the mighty light of God that never fails. All that is purity and virtue must rise, that the kingdom of God may be evergreen as an evergreen tree amongst the cold and snow of human consciousness in its unawakened and sleeping or dormant state. I am come this day then to bring a fresh approach to the law of the Christ, a consecration of vital force. I tell you, beloved ones, that the psychic world, so-called, which is contacted by many among mankind by reason of the lack of understanding, is peopled with men's lost identities. It is peopled with human creation and patterns and scenes of another era. It is linked directly with the part of the soul that has to do with memory, and therefore with the incoming of the holy radiance in a greater sense and essence, it will bring about a loss of some of this specific quality of memory, which is related to the discord patterns of mankind and those patterns of unhappiness which are not a part of the Christ identity of man. This loss is the gain of the kingdom of God. Without its loss, by the power of transmutation, man would be forever in chains and bondage to all of his errors and human creations. Without its loss, mankind would be denied their victory and freedom. And therefore, it is a mark of wise and discriminatory intelligence which utters forth the fiat and command, O God, blaze forth on the altar of my being thy flame of holy consecration. Let the flame of holy wisdom sever from me all that is discordant and vain from my past. From the album of my memory, let me consign to thy sacred fire every picture, every treasured picture, which is not reflective of thy identity, and let me, forsaking those patterns of human vanity, ride onward on the trail that leads to my victory and the victory of mankind, and find at the very end of the rainbow the beautiful, pure white light that does not fail. Drawing from that white light, let me spin anew rainbows of cosmic dreams, the wonderful and perfect plan of infinite God mind. I am come this day then to speak again also concerning form in its relation to memory. There are many who have reflected prior to their passing from the screen of life on just what it would be like when once they had made the transition. Let me call to your attention, beloved ones, that today you gaze out through the windows of your soul, those luminous orbs you call your blessed eyes, and you perceive light and color and form. Think you then that in the kingdom of God, where all is perfect light, that there is a dearth of form and symmetry? I tell you, nay, for in the kingdom of God, in the kingdom of the ascended masters, there is more beauty, more loveliness, more utilization of color, more utilization of light than you have even dreamed of in your wildest speculations. In truth, eye hath not seen nor ear heard, neither has entered into the heart of man the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. And I repeat that precious statement today, that as beloved Hilarion expressed it long ago, it may again find the infusion of life by reason of your attention and the mighty power that is inherent within it. O precious ones, to reconstruct, to redirect, to re-qualify energy is not an act of destructivity. It is an act that brings to mankind that consecration which declares, as I did long ago, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace, that where there is strife, I may bring thy love. O beloved ones, it must be so. It cannot be otherwise. Mankind must reconsecrate their energies. They must reconsecrate their thought energies that have emanated from them 10,000 years ago, as much as that which emanated from them within the past 5 minutes. Man is accountable and responsible for all his use of God's energy. For God has made man in his own image to confer upon man the wondrous perfection of God himself. Ye are gods, and as gods ye are responsible. Some of you are familiar with the opera, Götterdämmerung. Ye know then the twilight of the gods, and ye know that in the present shape and form of society and man, the world abides in the twilight of its godhood. But ye shall come into the dawn when the strength of God shall raise ye up, and you shall behold life in all of its fullness. Some of you, if you will be faithful, ere you shuffle off this mortal coil, will find coursing through your being energies you did not dream of. As you gaze upon the mighty power lines conveying electricity across your land, bear well in mind that there are spiritual transmission lines conveying to mankind's consciousness mighty tides of light and life and beauty and health and wholeness and victory. These lines may be connected to your being. You may hold in your hands the severed cable and feel the pulsations of energy by reuniting your being with this mighty tide of your God self and God flame. And then, as there pulsates through your being this mighty glory, which is your inheritance, you will realize that the messages of heaven, the consolation of heaven, the grace of heaven, the glory of heaven, the beauty of heaven are yours, and were yours all the time, always, even at those moments when you felt separated, when you felt discouraged, when you felt to some degree that you yourself could not proceed, and yet others were. Those specific moments, you will realize that it was your own sense of disconnection which caused you confusion and distress. And you will realize that it must then follow that you ought to consciously reconnect yourself with the heart of God, that you may feel that joy which He desires to establish within you. For if today you were to journey to Shigatse, where I am, and were to kneel at my feet, which I would never require, but which you might do, knowing who I am, because this is the state of men's consciousness, I tell you, beloved ones, that what I have spoken to you today, I would say there, and I would reach out my hands as I am doing, tangibly. My hands are offered to all of you, and I would say, my brother, my sister, arise and stand upon thy feet, and behold the Lord thy God blazing through thy being. Feel the flash of his fire. Know that it is the inheritance of the elect, and that it is your privilege to pursue your election until you have made it secure, until you have made certain that you will be established forever in the kingdom of the Father, to which you are entitled. O precious ones, all of human bric-a-brac, all of the psychic creation of mankind, which moans over the earth and moves upon the breath of the wind, creating fear and destruction and pain and anguish upon mankind, creating gossip entities, creating hate creations and creations of violence and darkness and shadow. All of these must be swept away by the purifying light of God until the world uncoils all of the twisted, misshapen elements of unhappiness which have caused them untold distress. And each coil is replaced by the snug wrappings of the Holy Spirit, enfolding mankind with bands of living golden substance, the illumination of Christ intelligence, the directed action of each day in perfect divine design. All this I am, all this I convey, but all this was first offered by God. And so the words of every ascended master, each specific jewel of cosmic Christ intelligence which you have ever received and which has ever been given to you, is for the adornment of your being, for the enhancement of your lives, for the making of all things more lovely. Come then and pursue this holy wisdom with me daily, until you too can worthily wear this mantle, the mantle of the brothers of the golden robe. I thank you. Flame of freedom, all-encompassing embrace of Almighty God, I adore thy presence in the universe, the sacredness of each hour consecrated to thy recognition brings to all the very sustenance of the life force that is within them, and brings to them the happiness of the ages in great paeans of praise for thy love and thy service to life universal and to life individualized. I am pouring out from the center of my being the concentration and consecration of the great flame of freedom which thou art, O God. O thou mighty I am presence, enfold all now in this flame of their identity, that they may know thee, the only true God, the being of their own individualized worlds, their life and their portion. precious heart friends of the ages, as I am come to you this day in the holy name of freedom, I am reminded once again of the minute state of man's consciousness when it insists upon revolving the little happenings of the day as though they are important, and fails to take into account the great allotment of heaven which is the portion of every man. It reminds me somewhat of a small boy trying to sail a paper boat in a teacup, for it is somewhat difficult for this to occur with any great degree of happiness, and therefore I urge all to expand the mighty radiance of their being and their sense of the universe out from the focus of freedom's flame within them until they are able to recognize the magnitude of life and not insist upon revolving the universe around themselves as though they were the center of that universe and all life but existed to satisfy their own ephemeral and passing being. Inasmuch as this cannot be so, then let all recognize that the reverse is true, and if life is ever to become known as it is intended to be, man must first of all recognize the supremacy of his own great God self, and recognize that the individualization of that self must first revolve around the central purposes of creation, ere the purposes of creation will deign to revolve around his own central being. Do you see, beloved ones, how it is necessary that man shall first offer himself to the great purposes of freedom in order that he may obtain that freedom, individually speaking? I have observed courtiers through the ages, kings, princes, and noblemen, as well as those of lesser domain, who have somehow sought to cheat the great law and have felt that it was not important what they thought or how they acted, so long as they were able to obtain the specific puny desires of their mortal self and their ego-induced purposes. These individuals have ever so frequently cried out to me with their last gasping breath and asked that I would sustain them and render them some form of deliverance from their own self-imposed bondage. And I have been kindly disposed to grant that request in each and every case which has occurred. And yet the great law has not permitted me to intervene to extend their life's portion in very few cases, for the simple reason that innumerable opportunities were given to them before that event occurred, and therefore it became necessary that these individuals should depart the screen of life and should be taken to schools of light, where they might find their minds transformed by the renewing power of life itself. Individuals do not realize the great karmic responsibility which the karmic board themselves have. They fail to take into account the responsibility of the great as being as deep and moving as the responsibility of the small. Man must realize, and should, that those of us given a more than ordinary responsibility for life must exercise it diligently and give account of our stewardship. Therefore the great karmic board is not always able to grant every request which mankind asks for, particularly when there is no demonstrable evidence of that individual's having paid allegiance to life or availed themselves of opportunities that were dispensed to them in response to a multitude of calls, which they then buried beneath a bushel of human neglect. I would like to call to the attention of all of the students that the great mercy of life is always kindly disposed, whenever possible, to set aside karmic matters and to give a life stream the full privilege of exercising their own individual mission upon the planetary body. When, however, by reason of gross recalcitrance and neglect, that individual reaches a point where the law can no longer intervene in a just manner, it is necessary that the bar of judgment itself shall exercise its power, and that that individual be summoned before the bar of judgment to give account of the energy and the use of that energy which they have in life been given. I point this out to the students today, not in order to lower a hammer of fear over the heads of mankind, but to bring forth the most merciful understanding in the consciousness of the students, that they will then not have any feeling whatsoever concerning the karmic board and its judgments or assessments, but that they will recognize that they themselves are in the main responsible for all such final actions which are taken at the close of any specific embodiment. Mankind then must consider how deeply the members of the karmic board ponder each matter pertaining to a life stream. Humility is the forte of every member of the karmic board, and there is never any personal feeling of vengeance which is wreaked upon any individual as a result of the judgment of the karmic board. The karmic board sustain the flame of freedom wherever possible and as long as possible, as long as the great law will permit and allow. I urge, therefore, that greater understanding enter into the heart and mind of mankind concerning their own direct responsibility for the administration of the law. Ultimately, mankind will find that they must face themselves, and it is to themselves that they must pay allegiance. At first, this statement may seem strange to those who are not familiar with the great universal law of the circle, but if you will consider for a moment the fact that you yourselves issued forth from the heart of your own true reality, the great being of God which you in reality are, you will understand that you must one day meet the return of that reality through the cycle of being and stand face to face with the radiant perfection of the image of God in which you were created. If then that which you have sustained and elected to sustain does not in itself appear to match the brightness of the appearing of your divine presence, it is necessary that the presence itself shall amend in you those conditions of imperfection. Sometimes, perchance, it is needful that this great presence of life shall say to you, you must again descend through the eternal cycles and be prepared to take re-embodiment upon the planet in order to make right those conditions which you did not make right in your previous embodiments. Then again, the great law, recognizing the tremendous merit of a life stream, will make it possible at inner levels for an individual after a number of years of purging and purification to make the ascension from inner levels and make right there those conditions which were not mended here. However, I would strongly advocate that no one should fancy for one moment that they may be given that opportunity. This is usually given only to the few and not to the many, for most adjustments are made right here where the ills themselves are created, in human form and in embodiment. Therefore I say to all, at this specific time, facing the advent of the Christmas season, it is necessary, in order to imbibe from the fount of happiness the great essence of Christ consciousness, that you recognize the spirit of justice that manifests in every divine release. So long as mankind fancy in their own consciousness that injustice exists in the universal law, they cannot manifest the great law of perfection of their own being. The very fact that man can conceive that God is unjust would of necessity warp the lens of his perception, so that he would not be able to perceive the purity of truth. I therefore urge all who have at any time considered the idea that the universe is unjust to amend their own decision here and now and recognize the great perfection of being. All that mankind demonstrate that is imperfect, all that is lacking in freedom, is the result of their own doing and must be mended by a response of their life stream to the ministrations of love. The great power of God, the great power of his infinite love, surrounds man at all times, waking or sleeping. I ask you then, what accountability ought the human soul to feel for this great love when first it becomes fully made known to the life stream? When a life stream stands before the radiant love and the wonder of God's presence, they cannot at first realize or perceive how this great love could not have been made known to them before. Ever so often at inner levels we hear the cry, why, this love has just come into being. It is just now beginning to manifest. And when they are told this is the love that always was and that did not begin to be, they are surprised. And they say, why was I not made aware of it before? And it is then that the weight of human density which they have carried about with them can be safely revealed to them, and they realize that it is their own human imperfections and their own vain ideas and their own wrong use of energy that has woven the substance of shadow between their own sense of vision of the love of infinite God and their own apparent power to see. I therefore urge sight for the blind. Let the spiritual eyes of men be opened. Let them have their freedom to see the power of God's love. And as they behold his radiant love in manifestation, let them not solely at the moment that I am speaking feel this great power, but let this power be with you through every hour of the day and the night. You cannot enter into and obtain your freedom, beloved ones, through placing your attention upon human discord and the patterns of imperfection which are manifesting in the world. You cannot obtain your freedom through a mere state of surcease from outer distress. If at this moment we were to relieve all of your burdens and you were free from them, this would not guarantee to you that you would have your eternal freedom. You must not only be free from outer distresses, but you must be able to enter into the heart of your eternal freedom. We would not have you in a state of vacuum or a state of being lukewarm. We would lift you to the great fire of perfection. We would lift you to the altar of Almighty God, to the altar of your being, that you may swear fealty with loving heart to this great God self that is your true being, that you may recognize in the perfection of your divine presence your own self, and that you may know that all else that has seemed to be your true self has but been vanity and the rubble of human discontent. How can mankind today find their freedom then? Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. Ask, and ye shall receive. These statements seem so simple, but the wherewithal of finding the way seems at times to be more difficult than stated in words. I urge, therefore, that every son of freedom shall place their attention upon the great light, and shall not direct their attention away from that to other things. As I am speaking to you today, I am consecrating my energies to the memory of many whom I have met through the ages who have not yet obtained their freedom, as they stood in my presence arrayed in cloth of gold and splendor shining and jewels, and some in rags. They did not know or recognize that freedom which I had eternally within me. They did not recognize that the same freedom was within themselves, and therefore today they are still begging for freedom from the heart of God. May I ask that attention of all be placed upon my words. All distractions, beloved hearts, at these times of dictation are not welcome, for they do cause some distress in the instrument. I urge you, therefore, to be diligent to keep your attention upon the Most High God. These releases are coming forth in most troubled times to mankind, and we must have your full attention. Blessed ones, I then would return in thought now to those who I knew long ago at the court of France. I would return also to those I knew in England and in various parts of Europe, in Hungary, in Transylvania, and throughout the world, even in China. And I would say to all of you that some of these are today occupying positions of authority in the world, and some of these are occupying quite simple and plain positions. However, many of them have forgotten their momentary or contact of some longevity with me. These individuals today find the memory of their great God self has grown dim to them, and the flame of freedom is no longer reality. There was a time when, by proximity to my own life stream, they sensed the fires of their own being. Why then has this condition occurred? Why have they seemed to retrogress? Beloved ones, it is solely in this matter of their own attention. I have spoken in the past many times, urging the attention of the Chelas upon their God self. Somehow it seems that man does not realize the fullness of the meaning of placing their attention upon their own God self. It is as though the God self in some way tended to rob them of their identity, and this is not true. By putting your attention upon your God self, you are obtaining your identity. By putting it upon your human self, you are losing that identity. Do you see then the meaning of this release? I assure you, ladies and gentlemen, that there are powers in opposition to the release of this which I am bringing forth to you today. There are powers that do not wish to have you obtain your freedom. These powers would keep you bound to the senseless round of diversion, which is indeed, if I may express it so, a merry-go-round, which, while it may have some temporary delights, certainly cannot be compared to the glory and freedom of our octaves. I say to you then, having once embarked upon this ride, why do mankind continue to repeat the cycle of their own densities? In almost each case that individuals perform some act for which they are later sorry, they say to themselves, I will not do this again, and so they resolve that they shall not. But then, when the cycle of the days turn, once again they seem to ride upon this horse of human folly, and they do not recognize that the steed upon which they ride is breathing fire and brimstone upon the neck of mankind, and also that behind them, from the pit of human density, is another steed breathing fire and brimstone upon their own neck. I say this with some degree of solemnity today because the time has come when all of the students who desire to have their freedom must recognize the sober facts pertaining to the law of karma and pertaining to their own being. I have in the past felt the need, but have not always amplified it as I would, to remind the students that these hours when we are given the opportunity of speaking to you are unusual times, that these messages are brought to you for your admonishment and for the release of our spiritual energy, so that we may bring you to a higher state of spiritual fruition. I will acknowledge and I must remind you of something that perhaps some of you do not know, and that is that there is a tremendous life force released during these dictations, so much so that some feel so much more elated and better after listening to a dictation from one of us than they did before, that they go forth and proceed to utilize this energy in the service of human imperfection. I want you, ladies and gentlemen, to recognize what I have just said, and therefore I choose to repeat it in another way. Mankind sometimes enter the sanctity of our aura and draw and utilize our energy, which we are releasing in the holy name of freedom, and use the buoyancy of that release to satisfy the purposes of human creation rather than utilize it in the service of the great light. And this is a solemn and awesome responsibility which I have long vowed I would one day declare to the students in order that they might recognize the measure of concentration and consecration which the great law would demand of them in order to give them the desires for which their own souls cry out. Down through the ages, one man has walked beside another, and suddenly, as horses at a racetrack, one has pulled out ahead. Who is watching with bated breath this great race where one receives the prize, where one is left behind? Who, I ask you, beloved ones, are not all who run in this race children of the one Father? And is it not true then that for each son set free to win the great prize, the Father does rejoice? And for each son who fails to apprehend the power that is within him to run well in this race, the Father has regret. I tell you then, beloved ones, that those who fall behind and do not press forward to win the prize are given the same opportunities as those that elect to pull out from the mass herd and obtain for themselves their own freedom. Now, I call to your attention that each child of the light that is presently in human form is today, whenever that one has a sense of struggle actually burning up the vital energies of their being in sensing the struggle that seems to embroil them in the great battlefields of life. By releasing themselves from this sense of struggle, by pondering upon the fact that they themselves are the children of God, rightfully entitled to the fullness of their victory, they enter into the spirit of Christ's peace, and by obtaining that feeling of Christ's peace, they are able to forsake the manner of human thought and the qualities thereof, and to feel the great pressure of their God self desiring to bring them to the fullness of Christ's accomplishment. Now men yearn within themselves for the power of levitation, for the power to step from outside the body temple, for the power to transform simple objects into jewels, to win for themselves approbation from men as magnificent alchemists. Let me tell you, beloved ones, that those who are able to refine the gold of being, to bring forth within themselves the spirit of reverence for God and for the ascended masters, have the power to do all these things given to them in due time. But in most cases, when once they have obtained this power, they find that it is not nearly so important, for by contrast to the reality of their being, they realize that the control of substance of a lesser dimension is not nearly so important as it is to control the factors of life within their own being and to rule themselves. Therefore, the power of the flame of freedom, which I am releasing this day to you as I am speaking, is to make you kings and priests unto God, as Melchizedek was of old, and to bring to you your immortal freedom. When I moved among the crowned heads of Europe, and I beheld the expressions of utter boredom upon their faces at times, I noted that they paid special heed to the messages which I brought to them. They felt and they sensed the vibrancy of my life, but they did not feel the vibrancy of their own, which was within them at the self-same moment. They were not quickened, but I was. And therefore I say to you today, I am quickened, but are you? And I therefore say to you today that I bring you the gift of your own quickening, if you will accept it. You must recognize that individuals must elect for themselves to be the chosen of God. We cannot do it for you. Even God your Father cannot do it for you, for He has already done it for you. He has created the master blueprint in which you are designed, and whose responsibility, I ask you, is it for the outpicturing of that? Who is the master workman? Your holy Christ self. But unless you shall submit to the holy Christ self and to the great God design that is outworking through you, how in the name of heaven can it be wrought? It can only be wrought through the submission of the human to the divine mission of the God self. This then is mastery in its fullness. Why am I today dwelling upon this factor so strongly? One day, when you have taken hold upon this law as I have stated it, and have recognized that there was something in your own determination and acceptance of my offer which accounted for your victory, you will then realize what it is that I have released to you today and why I have released it. But until then, beloved ones, I urge you not to pass by this quickening by some vain idea that this energy is merely released for the entertainment of one or more individuals. I tell you, this energy is released for the freedom of all mankind, for everyone upon the planetary body. Now, if today this room were to be expanded into a great amphitheater, if It would hold 10,000 people, and 10,000 ascended masters were to enter that great amphitheater. Every one of these 10,000 masters of light would wish for all mankind, including each one of you, the fullness of your freedom. And yet our wish, strong as it is, joined with the wish of God, would not be enough to bring it about until you yourself elect and determine conscientiously and consciously that you are going to accept your freedom by keeping your attention anchored upon your freedom. You see, beloved ones, the moment that you resolve that you will do this forever, at that particular moment you will take note there is established in your consciousness a magnet. And every time that your attention wanders from the great God Self of your being, this mighty magnet of your perfection and freedom will return to say, come back to me, come back to me, come back to me, I am your freedom. And with that call, the response of your outer self will bring about a proper diversion of your attention and energies, not to the outer, but to the inner. And as you turn your attention to the inner, you will find a certain mastery is coming into your being that you knew not before. And you will realize that the Christ communion of the ages, which has fired every ascended master's heart, has been in the center of that white stone, in the center of that new name of being that is within every man. You will recognize that the outer self, in a sense, must die, that the death of that outer self is indeed the putting off of the body of man's own sins, so to speak, the iniquities of man's wrong use of energy, and that in this process of the dying of the outer self, the old man with all of his corruptness and iniquities, man comes to a state where there is a very dim, cold spark of the sacred fire remaining within him, which itself seems almost to be extinguished. This is the obscure night of the soul, when mankind has at last succeeded in snuffing out their human interest, and then have not yet developed their divine interest until they can extend into the spiritual world to perceive the glory of the spiritual world. And therefore the coal burns with great dimness upon the altar, and all seems to be shadow surrounding the identity of that one. And in this almost abject and hopeless situation, they suffer the supreme temptation of their being to forsake this tiny coal and return once again as Lot's wife to behold the burning Sodom of human desires and feelings, and place their attention upon the myriad facets of outer creation. Oh, precious ones, at that moment I admonish you, when your victory is so close, do not fan the fires of outer world desires, but fan the fires of your own God self, so that there breaks forth upon the altar of being the soft, glowing, the suffused power of being glowing within your heart, expanding and expanding until at first it is like a tiny candle flame. It is not even visible, beloved ones. It is so tiny, so miniature, and yet it is real. Then gradually this tiny atom spark of light begins its mighty power of Christ expansion in the folds of man's being. Expand, 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 calls the flame of freedom, and it begins to come from within the recesses, within out, within out, within out, until it moves into the temple of being, gilding all with a touch of God's golden radiance. The dawn that is breaking then is reality, the reality of forever, and not the ephemeral outer self which must die. This is God's reality. And as time passes, it magnifies more and more until there stands beside the human the Christ man. When this occurs, once again the power of vision is obtained, the power of hearing, the power of knowing, but now in a different wise, no longer confined to the mere eyes of earth. Man possesses the dual faculty of seeing outwardly and within. Man possesses the faculty of hearing outwardly and within. Man possesses the faculty of knowing outwardly and within. The world then no longer seems to be real. The outer world takes on the quality of the unreal, for it is less than the perfection of the real. And man, perceiving the mirage upon the desert of life, knows that the oasis which he presently has is but a foretaste of the mighty land of promise which is yet to come. As Moses led the children of Israel across the desert and out of bondage to the promised land, so I urge you today to forsake the bondage of Egypt, the bondage of the outer self, the bondage of human creation, and all that it implies, and set sail for the promised land upon the great ship of God's majesty, Columbia, the gem of the ocean. The promised land is before thee, O each son of heaven. It speaks of divine majesty, of the one star and the many stars upon the field of honor blue. It speaks of the use of energy as God intends, the white purity, yea, and also the washing out and transmutation of the red dye of violence and hatred, and its change into the golden radiance of the love of God flowing through the veins of man's being. O transformation, how wondrous thou art! O transformation, how glorious is thy power! The flame of freedom speaks, the flame of freedom within each human heart. The flame of freedom saith unto all, come apart now, and be ye a separate and chosen people, elect unto God, men who have chosen their election well, who have determined to cast their lot in with the immortals. These are they who have set their teeth with determination, who have said, I will never give up, I will never turn back, I will never submit, I will bear the flame of freedom unto my victory, I will bear this flame in honor, I will sustain the glory of life within my nation, I will sustain the glory of life within my being, I will win my ascension, I will forsake all idols, and I will forsake the idol of my outer self. I will have the glory of my immaculate, divinely conceived self manifesting within me. I am freedom, and I am determined to be freedom. I am the flame of freedom, and I am determined to bear it to all. I am God's freedom, and He is indeed free. I am freed by His power, and His power is supreme. I am fulfilling the purposes of God's kingdom. O precious ones, it is to this that I urge all to attain. It is to this that ye came into manifestation. All else is vanity and vexation of spirit. All else must be swept away. It is a carnival of inequity. It must be replaced by a cornucopia of life's abundance. Know ye not that by the flame of freedom you obtain entree to the fullness of life, and that all universes part before the sword of your attention? Know ye not that this is the gate to mastery, the severing of the human veil, the cutting asunder of that which separates you from the holy place? Beloved ones, let not the abomination of desolation stand in the holy place where it ought not, but let the mighty ego of God stand within the temple of your immortal freedom, within your own beating heart. I thank you, and as a friend of old to the earth, to the friend of kings and priests and men, including beggars of old, I stand now as the friend of the many. I was then the friend of the few. Today I am the friend of freedom to the earth. I bear no exceptions, but I leave that response to my hearers. Those who hear me, those who read my words and my instruction, let them determine for themselves the authenticity of my words. Let them determine for themselves as to whether or not they shall elect to have their own freedom. I have offered, and I shall continue to do so, the consecrated flame of freedom to the earth. No one can be denied this flame, save they who deny themselves. Thank you and good afternoon.